I had a modest but satisfying life, including a regular job, a roof over my head, and most crucially, Wi-Fi. Loved. I worked 2 jobs. I did it because I wanted to, rather than because I had to. I believed in working hard, saving money, and creating a future for ourselves. It was exhausting, but I did not complain. I was doing it for us, for the life we were meant to have together. We lived in a modest yet comfortable house, nothing showy or big, but that was sufficient. I assumed I had everything a man could ask for: a wife who smiled at me as if I was her entire universe, a spouse who waited for me to return home from a lengthy shift, someone who would send me messages throughout the day saying she missed me, telling me to care for myself. She told me she loved me. I believed her. I trusted her. You see, when you love someone, you do not doubt them. You don't sit there wondering if they're lying to you. You simply believe. So that's what I did. I believed every word. Everyone smiles. I love you. But not everything is as it appears. Love can cause blindness, and I wasn't an exception. I believed I had the perfect marriage. I thought I had a faithful wife. But this is the truth. The truth was something else entirely. And one day, I'd wake up to a reality I never expected. It was just another evening, and I had just returned home from work, my body aching after another long shift. The sun was setting, giving a pleasant glow over the neighborhood, and I was eager for a wash, a supper, and perhaps a few hours of sleep before my next shift. That's when my neighbor called out to me. Now, let me be clear. I was not particularly close to any of my neighbors. Yes, I exchanged nods. Maybe a quick "how's it doing" as I passed them, but that was all. No lengthy chats, no friendships, just the kind of remote, courteous acknowledgement you offer to neighbors. So when this man, and an older man, maybe in his late 50s and always sitting on his porch monitoring the street, motioned for me to come over, I had no idea what to expect. I approached him, wiping sweat from my forehead. He appeared uneasy. His eyes flashed around, as if he wanted to ensure that no one else was listening. "Hey, I do not mean to cause trouble." He began shifting in his seat. "And perhaps it is none of my business, but I have seen something. Your wife has started bringing a man home while you are at work." I blinked. Then I chuckled, more out of disbelief than anything else, Guy. I repeated, shaking my head. "Not if she had brought someone home. It's probably a relative. Perhaps she has a cousin." He did not laugh. He did not even smile. He just gave me this look. I couldn't explain. "I don't think so," he replied quietly. "I have seen him several times, same dude, and it always happens when you're not present." I stood there, the air feeling heavier around me. For a second, I almost allowed his comments affect me. Almost. But this was ludicrous. My wife, the woman who texted me reminders to eat throughout the day and kissed me every morning before I left for work, she would not do something like that. I feigned a chuckle and waved him off. "I appreciate your compassion, but you must be mistaken." He hesitated as if he wanted to say more, but eventually gave me a slow nod. "All right," he replied. "Perhaps I am." I went away, shaking my head. I tried shaking it off. I did. That night, as I laid in bed, my neighbor's comments kept repeating in my thoughts. Despite my best efforts, the notion persisted. I assured myself that there was a rational explanation for everything. Perhaps it was a family member or a coworker. Someone is absolutely innocent. But no matter how hard I tried to tell myself, the feeling persisted. I needed to know, not because I believed she was guilty, but because I wanted to prove to myself that she was not. The next day, when she was out running errands, I set up these small cameras with memory cards to record their footage. I did not want to waste money on anything overly pricey. Not anywhere. Just in a few areas where I was confident she wouldn't notice. I needed proof that my neighbor was mistaken, that my wife was the lady I knew her to be. As I adjusted the last one, my hands shook slightly. I disliked having to think about this. However, it felt necessary. If she wasn't doing anything unlawful, What harm could it do? And if she was, I had to know. And so I waited. Days passed before I checked the recordings. I had almost convinced myself that I would not find anything, but the cameras had been a waste of time, and I had let a stranger's remarks disturb me without justification. I sat in front of my laptop and opened the files. The first few days of footage were normal. Just my wife moving around the home, watching TV and preparing dinner. Nothing suspicious, nothing strange. I felt a flood of relief come over me. I should delete these and forget about what happened, but I choose to watch the rest. That's when I noticed it. My wife stood in our living room, smiling and pouring 2 glasses of wine. A man I'd never seen before walked in. He was not related. He was not a friend. He was a stranger. My wife's greeting to him made it clear that they were at ease with one another. I watched as they moved to the couch. Sitting too near, he leaned in and kissed her, wrapping an arm around her waist. My chest tightened. They then stood up, holding hands, and proceeded upstairs to our bedroom. My breath caught. My throat felt dry, but I refused to look away. I watched them disappear into the room I had shared with my wife for many years. I glanced at the empty corridor and the closed door, knowing exactly what was going on behind it. The details hit me like a blow in the stomach. After a time, the man emerged wearing my bathrobe, which I used every morning after a shower. I had to pause the video and close my eyes in order to breathe. I sat there for a while, feeling empty. I could have challenged her. I could have asked her why. Why had she done this? Why had she lied to me? Why had she allowed another man into our home? But why give her the satisfaction of explaining it away? I knew how it would turn out. She would lie, twist the truth, cry, beg, and say all the appropriate things. She would tell me it was a mistake and didn't mean anything, that she continued to adore me. Perhaps she tried to make me feel guilty, say I was too busy working, I didn't pay enough attention to her, and it was my fault she did this. I know I would not give her that chance. I'd offer her no reaction at all. Instead, I decided not to argue, fight, or tell her anything I knew. So I began planning. When I chose to quit, I realized I needed to do it properly. This wasn't simply about going away. I have to entirely obliterate myself. There are no loose ends. There is no way for her to find me. The first thing I did was begin saving every extra cash from my 2 jobs. I had always handled our finances, so moving money around would not appear unusual. I reduced my expenditures, avoided unnecessary expenses, and made every effort to save money. My wife never noticed. She was too absorbed and wrapped up in her own world to notice what was going on. Next, I set up a private account using one of these global payment solutions. I understood that if I drained our joint account all at once, it would trigger bells. I started tiny. A few hundred here, a few hundred there, gradual transfers that would not raise suspicion. I gradually transferred my portion of our funds into the new account, ensuring that I didn't leave with nothing. Credit cards came next. We shared a few, and I realized I had to cut the connection. I informed her that I was switching banks and wanted to merge our accounts for better administration. She scarcely listened as long as she had access to what she needed. She didn't care about the specifics. I turned them off one by one, ensuring that she wouldn't be able to monitor my whereabouts through financial transactions once I left. Quitting my employment was the final step. I carefully submitted my resignation, making certain to leave on good terms so that no one would have reason to hunt for me later. I informed my supervisor that I was moving on to something greater, a new opportunity in another city. My coworkers wished me well, shook my hand, and encouraged me to stay in touch. They had no notion that the moment I walked out of that office, they would never hear from me again. And during all of it, my wife was fully unaware, and yet she was still visiting him, bringing him into our home, and using our bed for purposes it was never intended for. The night before I departed, I sat in our living room one last time. I looked around and saw everything, taking it all in one final time. This is no longer my home. It's a spot where I was made to look foolish. I reached for my wedding ring. The simple gold band had meant love, devotion, and an unfulfilled promise. I slid it between my fingers to feel its weight one last time before throwing it away. I didn't need it where I was headed. At 4:30 a.m., I stood at the door, my luggage slung over one shoulder. There is no hesitancy, no second thoughts. I turned the doorknob and stepped outside, closing the door behind me with a faint click. I did not glance back, not once. By the time the sun rose, I had already left. I didn't realize it at the time, but I later discovered how everything unfolded for her. How one morning she awoke to find the bed beside her deserted. She probably didn't notice it at first, but when she moved around the home expecting to see me getting ready or in the shower, the sinking feeling began to set in. I discovered that she was walking through the house, yelling my name, and becoming increasingly frantic. As the silence continued, she presumably checked the typical spots, but I wasn't present. My belongings were not there either. My boots were gone, my jacket was missing, and the location where I always kept my keys beside the door was empty. She called my phone. No response. It went directly to voicemail. A couple more calls, and still nothing. Panicking, she contacted my job number, only to learn that I had quit last week. She must have realized there was something wrong at that point. I had disappeared, leaving no trace. Then came the final blow. She raced to the bank and discovered that our joint account had been depleted. By the time she found it out, there was almost nothing left. It wasn't until the bank informed her the truth that she understood I hadn't departed. I had fully removed myself from her life. I didn't know how long she looked for me. I had no idea the extent of her desperation or how far she went to find me, but I eventually learned the details. She hired a private investigator, spent money she probably couldn't afford, and embarked on a quest for someone who had already left no trace. The harder she looked, the more she realized how meticulously I had planned my leave. Every movement I made was planned, each step was computed, and as time passed, I heard that regret overtook her. She couldn't repair it. I could not describe it, couldn't even ask forgiveness. There was no way for any of that. She had only herself to blame, and perhaps it was the worst of it. I was already somewhere else, knowing she would never be able to make amends for what she had done while hunting. I found a place far away from the country and everything that bound me to the past. I settled on a Caribbean island where nobody knew my name, and the speed of life differed. Slower, quieter. I found tranquility there, something I hadn't realized I was lacking. At first, I lived alone and enjoyed the isolation. The silence became my shelter, but I finally met someone. She was unlike the others. She was nice and understanding. Most importantly, she respected me for who I was. I felt what true love should be like. Simple, honest, and real. We created a life together, one that was founded on mutual respect. And when our daughter was born, I knew I'd made the correct decision. This was the family I'd always wanted. The family I thought I'd never see again. The future I deserved. And the old life, it was gone for good. Years passed before she discovered me. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not really. By then, I'd moved on, created something new, something real. My life in the Caribbean had become everything. My previous existence was neither pleasant, honest, or devoid of the burden of betrayal. I had a family now, a wife who genuinely loved me, a girl who was my whole world. I'd stopped thinking about my past. It had no power over me until the day it came knocking. I didn't notice her first. She saw me. I later discovered that she was somehow involved. Eventually, she found me. She flew to my new house. Then she noticed me. I was outside, just like any other day. Standing at the market, I held my daughter's hand as she excitedly tugged at me, pointing to something she desired. And that's when my history caught up to me. She must have stood there, watching. She was processing what she had seen. This was not what she expected. Maybe she assumed I would still be broken, still bitter, carrying the burden of what she had done to me. Perhaps she felt I'd spent all these years gazing over my shoulder, unwilling to move on. Instead, she found me a happy home, free from the anguish she had left behind. There she was, my history right in front of me. She had come all this way. I've spent all these years searching, and yet, now that she was in front of me, she didn't appear to know what to do. She took a step forward. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. She muttered my name. Her voice scarcely rose above a breath, a plea, a last desperate attempt to find something, anything, that could still unite us. I tilted my head slightly and studied her as if she were a stranger, because that is exactly who she was. For a brief period, she searched my face for recognition, emotion, or something to tell her. I remembered that I still cared, but all she discovered was emptiness. I let the silence between us last long enough for the reality to set in. I finally spoke. I apologize. Do I know you? The word struck her harder than any yell, accusation, or angry argument ever could. She blinked, and I noticed something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Defeat. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't give her an opportunity to explain, to cry, to beg. I just turned around. I took my daughter's hand and walked away, and I've never looked back. I did not feel anything as I went away, just peace. The kind of peace that comes from realizing that the past no longer has any control over you. I believed I'd never heal. That betrayal would haunt me forever. Her betrayal has destroyed everything we ever had. Years of love, trust, and sharing memories. All undone by a single decision. But that was the past. Here's the next story. I've been involved in the theater since I was 14 years old. My first appearance on stage was in school. As the years passed, I've taken acting classes. I was a member of my high school drama club and took acting classes while in college. I am still involved in community theater. I eventually began designing and building sets, as well as directing shows, rather than acting in them. I met my wife the same year I began acting. Her name was Donna Zachary. My name is Mark Abbott. Donna's family moved into the house next door to my own. Now, next door is a relative word. We did not live in a cookie-cutter neighborhood where the houses were all adjacent to each other. Our closest neighbor was approximately 300 feet distant. Our home featured 5 bedrooms and 5.5 bathrooms. Both families were, as they say, content. The two families interacted together and grew close, extremely close. In fact, I believe my father and Donna's mother were very close. They were becoming intimate with one another. Anyway, after a few years, Donna and I decided that we'd marry when the time came. That was all right with me. Donna was quite gorgeous. So, over time, she and I built almost as tight a friendship as her mother and my father. Actually, we developed the same intimacy that they did. We only did it on the night of our senior prom. Original number. But that is how it happened. She grew to love the theater just as much as I did over the years. We participated in multiple high school and college productions together. In fact, one of our favorite places to be intimate was the Pennsylvania State University Theater. We resided near Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, so Penn State seemed like the logical choice. We dated and loved throughout college. We both liked college, experimented with new individuals, and shared our experiences. I knew Donna adored all things sexual. In our private moments together, she was passionate and adventurous. We tried it for the first time on our wedding night, and it quickly became a staple of our relationship. Like Donna, I appreciated intimacy. Still do. In reality, during our senior year of college, we settled. We had sonar, or wild oats, and concluded that our parents were correct and that we should get married. On that night, I formally proposed. We agreed that from now on, we would devote ourselves entirely to one another. That worked out well for 20 years, and then everything went to hell. As you may have guessed, Donna and I never sought anything because, as I previously stated, both of our families were content. Her father got a large chunk of money, and I've never seen him work in his life, unless you consider restoring old cars work. My father, on the other hand, worked extremely hard to provide for us. He owns various enterprises, automobile component outlets, 5 of which are car washes. Three of these. There are also fast food establishments. There are three of those as well. They all earned money, but fast food restaurants were huge moneymakers. They had each made their riches in different ways, but they shared one thing in common. They never accepted anyone's word for anything, never make a handshake contract. Almost everything they did required someone's signature. When I turned 16, my parents gave me a car. They actually loaned it to me so I could drive it. I had to sign a document stating that the automobile belonged to my parents and that they might reclaim it for any of the reasons specified on the form. I needed to sign. The final reason on the list was that the signatory accepts that the registered owner, my father, of the aforementioned vehicle reserves the right to deny usage of said vehicle at any moment. The registered owner believes that the signatory, by actions or conduct, no longer deserves free and unrestricted use of the vehicle. I never lost my free and unlimited use of the vehicle. It was a fantastic opportunity for me, and all I had to do was keep my nose clean, which I did. I had 3 vehicles on contract until I graduated from college. Then my father gave me the one I was using at the moment. All 3 cars were Ford pickups. My senior class in high school was headed to New York for our senior trip. I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to watch some actual Broadway plays, but I was limited on cash, so I begged my father for a loan. He handed money to me, but only after I signed a contract stating that I would repay the debt by working in one of his enterprises, the business and store of his choosing, at $10 per hour. Furthermore, the contract indicated that loan payments would be deducted straight from my check, and that subject payments would not exceed 50% of net income for the pay period. As previously said, both Donna's and my father's insisted on contracts for nearly everything they did. A prenuptial agreement came as no surprise to either of us. The prenup stated that if we divorced for any reason other than adultery, we would both keep whatever we brought into the marriage and divide equally any and all assets earned or accumulated during the marriage. In the case of adultery, the offending party departed the marriage with only the property or asset he or she had brought into the marriage. The injured party would keep whatever they had acquired or accumulated during the marriage. It sounded fair to both of us, and we had already sown our wild oats and promised eternal fidelity to one another, so we had no issue signing. So it was written, and so it was finished. Move forward 20 years. Donna's father and mother were still living, with the former fixing antique automobiles and the latter doing whatever the hell she pleased. My parents both died when the jet they were in crashed 39,000 feet into the Atlantic Ocean on its way to Paris. I was in the latter stages of liquidating their estate. I had worked with my father since graduating from college and had practically taken over the fast food restaurants, which now numbered 8, nearly 2 years after we married. Donna and I have twins. Our love life was never anything short of fantastic. We always made love like we meant it, with one exception. Our college love life were never addressed. The only exception was that I enjoyed hearing her discuss her lesbian liaisons, and I had no reason to suspect she had ever been anything less than absolutely and entirely faithful until that day. Throughout our marriage, both of us maintained our passion for the theater. We made several visits to New York to see Broadway shows. Our twins, Samantha Sammy and Samuel Sam, were 17, 5 years old, and knew Times Square almost as well as they did their own neighborhood. They had been taking acting, dance, and singing lessons since they were 3 years old, and they were both proficient in all 3. They had appeared on stage in several of our local shows, as well as those at their high school. Donna and I had both stopped acting but remained active. In our neighborhood, there were 3 community theaters and 1 organization that hosted professional equity union members. Actors from New York and Chicago will perform their shows. When necessary, the professional group would bolster their cast with non-professional, non-equity member performers from the 3 local companies. On various instances, All four of us had the opportunity to collaborate with specialists. As previously said, Donna and I had ceased acting, but were still active. For the past few years, I've directed some of our shows. That was more enjoyable than acting. She served as president of one of the group's boards. I served on another board. The bylaws of all three clubs stated that family members may not serve on their boards at the same time. She was the president of my favorite group, and I spent a lot of time working on sets and maintaining their buildings and grounds. Over the last few months, we've had some issues with neighborhood youths breaking into our building. They never really caused much damage, but they did steal several of our tools, including our lawnmower. The local police advised us that petty crimes like this were rarely investigated unless we knew who was conducting the crime. They had limited resources and couldn't employ them on little issues. The board decided to be proactive and aid the police, so they purchased 6 motion-detecting audio and video cameras for placement in and around the facility. Donna requested me to install them. I promised to do it the first chance I got. She requested that I notify her as soon as I completed it so that she could report it to the board. It was on a Wednesday. My attorney and I had just exited the courthouse. My parents' estate was settled, and I was affluent, comfortable, healthy, and reasonably young 43-year-old with a loving wife and 2 wonderful children. I was on my way home, but decided to swing by the theater to install the cameras. I placed 2 of them outside the theater, one facing the main door and the other toward the stage door. I also mounted one inside, facing the box office. Our workshop was a separate building with a single door. I aimed one at the door. Another was inside, aiming at the workshop where we kept our tools. The final location was in the props room, where our stage furniture and equipment were stored. I connected them all to the computer in the theater office, and in case the PC is stolen, I added a link to my laptop, which I had brought with me to the attorney's office. Any movement in or near the theater or workshop would trigger an alert on both the theater computer and my laptop. Then I headed home. I had planned to tell Donna about it that evening, but the news of the final adjudication of my parents' estate took precedence, and the entire evening was spent discussing a large new house, as well as one in Vail where we could go skiing, something we had never done before. We also talked about a luxury RV, international travel donations, new cars, and so on. We were all exhausted by bedtime and had forgotten about the theatrical cameras. And so it continued until Friday, only 2 days later. It was just after 7 p.m. when my laptop beeped. I had no idea what it was, so I looked about and discovered that the motion detector in the theater had gone off. I clicked the link and discovered that the camera outside the workshop had been enabled. The footage showed 2 young men breaking into the building. I was about to contact the cops, but I wanted to obtain clearer shots of their faces for later identification and see if we could see them carry anything out of the building. They gazed around for about 10 minutes, as if they were in no hurry. I overheard their chat and discovered that they had been there previously and were expecting that this time something of worth was available for them to sell. They mentioned that all of our tools were engraved so that we could recognize them, therefore selling them was pointless. They walked to the refrigerator and got themselves a couple of soft drinks. Just then, I noticed them get up and gaze at the door. Then, without saying anything, they dashed into the props area and hid behind a china cabinet donated to us. Then I watched Donna, my dear wife of 20 years, walk in. She was being pushed by John Xavier Neal, a member of the theater board, a sleazy, oily character who was always placed in our plays as a philandering, no-good lowlife. In the theater, we call this typecasting. Hurry up. I am ready for intimacy. So am I, my wife replied. God, it feels like forever. She took his hand and led him inside the props room. He couldn't decide whether he should elevate her skirt to reach her lower back or unbutton his own shirt with one hand, since she was holding the other. When you're excited, a week can feel like it lasts forever. It's fine, sweetheart, she said. I will take care of the horns. They were now next to one of the sofas in the props room. They appeared to have been there before, as he proceeded to the cabinet containing the linens and blankets, while she began removing her clothes. "Forget those," she said. "Get over here." He hurriedly placed a sheet over the sofa and pulled her upon it. At that point, she was almost undressed, and he forcibly removed the rest. I watched as Jerk ripped both of them off of her. She was now naked. Their two observers also heard it. "God damn," said one of the young guys behind China's cabinet. "Oh my God," exclaimed Donna. "What was that? What was it?" said Sleazeball. "I overheard someone," she responded. "Nonsense. There is nobody here. Do not bet on it, Pops," said one of the intruders. Sleazeball jumped up and the boys stepped out. That was quite a display. "How about getting some action as well?" One of the intruders spoke. Donna said, "Damn you. Wrong, Mother. We are the ones who will put you to the test right now." "Go to hell," she said as she began to dress. "Listen, woman, either we made love with you right now, or these photographs will appear on every telephone pole and website. We can find you listening." He spoke as they both held up their cell phones. "Oh, God, you wouldn't. Oh, we will, unless you look after both of us in the same way you did for your beloved John. Do something, please," she pleaded. "And just what do you expect me to do?" said John Xavier Neal. "That guy ain't stopping anyone. He certainly won't. He's so afraid right now that he can't stand up for himself. But then, maybe she prefers weak men. Now, fellas, I can't afford to get caught up in something like this." John Xavier Neal said, "My wife would kill me." "Oh no. If he is married, then she is also married. All good then. Now I know we have leverage since you cannot afford to be caught either. Oh God, no." "Please," Donna murmured as both boys began removing their garments. But pleading did not help. She was stuck between two strangers, totally at their mercy. The jerk couldn't take it anymore and decided to join in. God, I was sick when I watched her and the guy walk into the building. My first inclination was to contact the cops. I was terrified for her. But as she began with the jerk, curiosity seized control. And by the time Dwayne and his friend joined in the fun, I was so sick that I didn't care what happened to her. I was completely disgusted. I sat there, wondering what to do next. I didn't get to the bathroom. I vomited in the hallway. I knelt on my knees, glanced at my vomit, caught a whiff of it, and then threw up again. After a few minutes, I was able to clean things up. Then I vomited again, this time with my head in the commode. I went back to shut down my computer. I couldn't take anymore. Actually threw up. Doesn't accurately represent what I did. After the first 3 times, there was nothing left to come out, so I dry heaved the remaining 2 times and sat for 2 hours, trying to figure out what to do. My immediate thought was to kick her out of the house. Then I chose to forgive her. After all, she had been faithful for 20 years. Or did she go back to kicking her out? What should I do with the twins? Okay, I forgive her, but she humiliated me and appeared to enjoy it. Kick her out. An hour later, I was still undecided about what I was going to do when I heard the garage door open and she strolled in with a big smile. "Hello, sweetheart. How was your day?" she stated as she approached and attempted to kiss me. I'm not sure if I smelled excrement on her breath or imagined it, but I made up my mind in that moment. "You have 1 hour to collect your belongings and leave this place," I roared. "What exactly are you talking about? 1 hour. Don't be here when I return, and I never want to see or speak to you again. You, cheating spouse." After 1 hour, I left. 2 hours later, I arrived home. When I entered her bedroom, I noticed that several of her belongings were missing. I sat on the bed, crying. After approximately 15 minutes, I looked up and noticed the twins standing in the doorway. "What have you done to Mom?" asked Sami. "That is between your mother and me. She claimed you kicked her out of the house. Is that correct? I told you it's between your mother and myself." "The hell it is. It concerns the two of us. This is our family. She stated she came home and you instructed her to go. We want to understand why. It is none of your concern. Period." This concludes the conversation. We have the right to know, Dad. Get out of my room. Mom's room, too. Not anymore. Now, get out and leave me alone. Oh, we will leave you alone. All right. We'll be with Mom. We want you to know that we think what you did was wrong. We think you're a wonderful jerk, and we don't want anything to do with you anymore. We have nothing to say to you, and nothing you say interests us. You are entirely out of our life. Wait a minute, young lady, I responded, rising up. Who do you think you're talking to with that tone? Who am I? I'm the girl who used to be your daughter but realized you're a complete jerk and no longer want anything to do with you. She proceeded towards her chamber. How about you, Sam? One questioned. Forget you, Dad. What you did to Mom was the most vile and terrible thing I could think of. I don't want to see you again. And he went to his room. I was sitting downstairs when they came down. They each had a suitcase and some clothing on hangers as they walked towards the door. Are you certain you want to do this? I asked upstairs as Sam had suggested. Forget you. And they were gone. It took me about 30 seconds to determine my next plan of action. I assumed I knew the first location the three of them would go. I went online and located the company I was looking for and phoned them. I then phoned the bank. 2 hours later, 2 trucks arrived in front of Donna's parents' house. One of the drivers pressed the doorbell. Sammy opened the door. We're from Keystone Recovery, and we're here to retrieve those 2 Mustangs sitting out front. What exactly are you talking about? The registered owner of such vehicles has asked us to recover them. He also demanded that we give Samantha and Samuel Abbott copies of these contracts. Have a lovely day. While he was speaking with Sammy, the other driver started placing the Mustangs into the backs of the trucks. They had done it so many times that it took only seconds to load both vehicles. I had handed them the spare keys in case the other ones were not available. For some reason, the first driver returned to his vehicle, and they drove away. Sam, Donna, and her mother were standing in front of the contracts that the twins had signed on their 16th birthday. I gave them the automobiles. Thank you, Dad. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was Donna. I told you I didn't want to talk to you again. I pressed and called. The telephone rang again. It was Sammy. As you might expect, she did most of the talking about the twins. Hello. Is it possible that there is a bigger jerk than you? I was seeing a side of my children that I had never imagined existed. Hey, young woman, do not blame me. I'm simply assisting you in accomplishing your objectives. What exactly are you talking about? She asked. You stated 2 hours ago that you and your brother had no further desire to interact with me. So I'm helping you achieve that aim by returning my cars. I am making your separation from me more easy. I assumed it would be less for you to do. You should be thanking me, not calling me a jerk. Oh, and by the way, I canceled your credit cards. Damn, you're a jerk. The phone went dead. Yes, sir. Aside from my children, I never imagined they existed, a really unpleasant aspect. But they undoubtedly feel the same way about me. It goes without saying that I have filed for divorce. Donna tried to call me several more times, but I hung up each time. Neither she nor the twins came to the house for more of their belongings. I returned to the theater to erase Donna's little love fest video. I did not delete the copy from my laptop after that. I never returned to that theater. 3 weeks later, we met, Donna, our attorney, and I. I was surprised to see the twins there too. I did not want them there, and since they were under 18, I could have prevented it. But after some thought, I decided it was time. The meeting began with Donna's attorney stating that she did not want the divorce, and that the reason given for the divorce, adultery, was false. The twins' expressions indicated that Donna had not explained the cause for the divorce. My attorney basically stopped him and said, "Let's get to the point. Let's watch the video." And he started the video. The cameras in the theater had recorded. "Oh no, God, no, stop it!" Donna screamed. She stared at me. "How did you get that?" I said nothing. I told her I didn't want to talk to her, and I didn't. The twins looked at each other before leaving the room. I told her attorney that if her client signed these forms, in the next 10 minutes, she could come to my house and recover the rest of her belongings, including the jewelry she left in the safe. The house will be open from 5 to 7 p.m. this evening, but she is not entitled to anything else under the prenup, period. And don't tell me the video isn't admissible in court. You and I both understand that it is admissible. It was filmed on Theaterland, which is widely accessible, and no one has a reasonable expectation of privacy, as they would in a private residence. I got up and left. I walked out of the conference room and out of the office complex toward the elevator. The twins stood there waiting for me. "Oh my God, Dad, we are deeply sorry. We had no idea." I raised my hand to stop her. "We no longer have anything to say to you, and nothing you say interests us. You are entirely out of our life." That was what you mentioned a few weeks back, without knowing my side of the story. And as far as I am concerned, it now applies to me as well. Instead of waiting for the elevator, I turned and headed down the steps. And as for calling me Dad, you gave that up, right? If I were you, and given our recent insight into your mother's actions, I would ask her who your biological father is. I know it can't be me, because none of my children would condemn someone without first hearing their side of the story. The house will be open from 5 to 7 p.m. this evening, so you can pick up the rest of your items. You can have everything in the home. Whatever left over after 7 will be donated to charity. You may want to bring a truck and some help. Please do not bring any of your mother's lovers. I went down the stairs and out of the building. I just left the parking lot when my attorney called. I pulled to the curb to accept the call. The paperwork was signed. My marriage was over. I sat in my pickup crying. The twins arrived that evening at 5 p.m. I noticed them looking at the for sale sign on the yard. I let them into the house, and as usual, Sammy attempted to speak for both of them. I raised my hand to stop her. Not one word, just gather your belongings and depart. She started speaking again. I halted her with a single word. You leave here with nothing. Then I entered what had been my office and closed the door. I heard them leaving approximately 20 minutes later. Shortly after they went, the doorbell rang. I walked to the door and opened it. My father-in-law stood there. Donna stood behind him. "May we come inside?" "Of course. Donna, go collect your items. I will chat to Mark." She headed upstairs. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Not very excellent." "And you?" I asked. "Not that good either." The twins informed us what transpired in the attorney's office. They were quite rattled up, especially when you instructed them to find out who their biological father was. I just stood there. We were unaware of Donna's situation when she returned home today. Her mother had kicked her out of the house. The twins can stay if they want, but Donna must leave by tomorrow. I just stood there. The twins are sorry for how they treated you. Perhaps you should forgive them and give them another opportunity. I don't think my relationship with them is any of your concern, but I understand you're just trying to help. They were willing to put me under the bus before learning the full facts. There was no forgiveness, even when there was nothing to forgive. They treated me like a jerk. I will not quickly forget or forgive it. Now, please forgive me. I have stuff to do. Give my best to Mom. I've always loved and respected you both. I hope you understand that. I went back to my workplace. I overheard them go. Fast forward 5 years. I hadn't heard from Donna or the twins. I sold the house, packed my vehicle, and drove south. 4 months after departing Pennsylvania, I awoke in Key West, Florida. Needless to say, I didn't need money. In reality, I had no intention of working again. My first day there, I was playing tourist and walked down one of the downtown streets, almost passing a little community theater. I paused and chose to look around. The front entrance was locked, so I strolled around to the back. Some people were working at the shop. I introduced myself and began conversing. Before I knew it, I was holding a cordless drill and helping to assemble a set. They were all volunteers with other jobs, as are the majority of community theater participants. So around midday, they all began to go. "Can you return tomorrow?" I asked the guy who appeared to be in charge. "Sure. What time?" 8. "We will have coffee ready." The next morning, I arrived at 8:00 a.m. with a dozen donuts. I've been here since. During these 5 years, I purchased a home within walking distance of the theater. I serve on the board of directors, have appeared in several plays, and have directed 3. In fact, I heard it while working on the set of the next play I was directing. Dad. I froze. Daddy, is that you? I didn't need to look. I knew who it was. I put down my drill and turned to face her. How did you find me? Most importantly, why? We were strolling down the street when I noticed a banner advertising your performance, and I saw your name. What do you want, Samantha? Can we speak for a while? A long pause. Please. I stood there. Go ahead. Talk. Sam and I treated you horribly. We had no right to, and you did not deserve it. We haven't had a single day in the last 5 years without regretting it. We tried for a year to find you. Grandpa assisted us in hiring an investigator, and we were able to track you for the first 3 months. We knew you were in Charleston. Then we lost you. We're terribly sorry, Dad. We love you, miss you, and long to be back in your life. Charleston was where I decided to stop using credit cards and instead utilize cash. I have not used a credit card since, she replied with a smile. You're our father. We performed a DNA test. How could you do it without using my DNA? I asked. We got it. Do you remember the box that contained all of your baby teeth? As Sam and I remember the story, your mom saved all of your teeth. Whenever they fell out or were pulled, she stored them in a tiny box. You had your teeth in one side, while Sam and I had ours in the other. We had them tested. And, whether you like it or not, you are our father. But, most significantly, you are our daddy. I had to smile. Just then, we heard a boat whistle. Key West is a popular port for cruise ships. Oh, hell. I have to go. Are you aboard that ship? She asked. Yes. Some of my sorority sisters and I decided to take a cruise as a graduation present for ourselves. I graduated from Penn State last month. Good for you. She requested me to accompany her for a portion of the walk. I secured the theater door, and we strolled to the harbor. You may not want to hear this, but Sam and I rarely speak with Mom. We visit her at Grandma and Grandpa's every now and then. They don't want her to come around, but they won't let her or her child go hungry or homeless. Child, I questioned if one of the men she had an intimate relationship with that day had gotten her pregnant. I shrugged. I could care less. I had a fleeting impression that she was too old, but I suppose she wasn't. You've got a granddaughter. Sam married last year, and they welcomed a kid 2 months ago. Her name is Marcy. Elizabeth. They named her after you. I just happened to have some photos of her. She had 2 of them and brought them out to show me. She handed them to me, but I turned away without looking at them. Don't you want to see her? She asked. No. You and Sam have no idea how sad I was when you told me you wanted me out of your life. I had spent all of my love and emotion in my family, and it was all swept away in one day. In your mother's situation, it was most likely long-term. She had apparently been cheating for quite some time, but you and Sam seemed to be able to dismiss me with such ease and little effort that I was taken aback. Now you're here to say you're sorry and want me back in your lives. I'm not sure I have the emotional strength to accomplish that. What if I do anything to make you angry again? Would you do the same thing? I don't know if I'm willing or capable of going through it. It's the same for his daughter. If I stare at her photo and build an emotional relationship, he can abruptly remove her from my life. Why should I put myself through that? Daddy, all we can do is apologize and ask. No, do not ask. Beg for a chance to make it up to you. We were now at the cruise terminal's entrance. We paused. Well, I have to leave. She caressed my arm and moved as if to embrace me. I tensed and moved away. She stared at me, and tears began to form in her eyes as she turned and walked through the gate. I saw her leave. She turned back to face me. We adore you, Daddy. And she was gone. Damn, I must have repeated it 1,000 times. On my walk back to the theater, I almost died as a pedestrian 3 times because I was not paying attention to what I was doing. She was mistaken about one thing. It has not been 5 years. It's been 5 years, 4 months, and 18 days. Now, what should I do? They know where I am. Should I leave and go somewhere else? Hell no. This is my house. Tomorrow, I will call to reactivate my credit cards. As soon as Sammy returned to her ship, she pulled out her phone and called Sam. Hello, sister. Are you feeling seasick yet? No, this guy is clever. And you'll never guess who I spent the previous half hour with. Do I truly care? He asked. In this scenario, I believe so. It was Dad. A long pause. Are you there? I'm here. Is he okay? He appears to be. He's still quite bitter. Did you tell him we were sorry? Yes. I told him about Marcy several times and attempted to show him her image, but he refused to look at it. And she went on to explain to Sam their father's reasoning. Christ. Yeah. I also told him about Mom. Oh my goodness. How did he take it? I had the feeling that he couldn't care less. I do not blame him for that. Okay. I have to go. We're preparing to sail. See you in a few days. Okay. Love you. I love you too. 5 weeks after returning home, Sammy received a phone call. Hello. This is Detective Brian from the Key West, Florida Police Department. I'm attempting to find Samantha Abbott. I am Samantha Abbott. Miss Abbott. Do you know a Mark Abbott in Key West? That is my father's name. And he lives there. Why, Miss Abbott? Your father had a stroke and is currently in the hospital. Oh, my God. How awful is it? You'll have to consult with his doctor, Miss Abbott. I am not at liberty to discuss medical details. I would advise, however, that you arrive as soon as possible. Thank you. Detective. When you arrive, please ask the hospital staff to contact me. Please. I will. Thank you. 12 hours later, she and Sam were standing outside their father's room, speaking with the attending physician and nurse. The stroke happened 2 weeks ago. It was opening night for the production he was directing. He and his cast and crew went to a neighborhood bar to celebrate after the show. We can't really estimate the harm because he's been in a coma since he was admitted. We know there has been some physical damage, but we have no idea about potential brain damage because he is unable to speak with us. And, medically speaking, there appears to be no justification for him to be in a coma. Frankly, we don't understand. You should also know that he hasn't been alone since he arrived. He always has someone from the theater with him. There is someone inside now. Do you know why it took so long for us to receive notification? I'm not certain, but I don't believe anyone knew you existed until a few days ago. Okay, thank you, doctor. Can we see him now? Of course. Nurse Johnstone and I will be with you. They entered the room. A young man was seated and reading loudly from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, a favorite of Mark's. When the 4 people entered the room, he came to a stop and stood up. Hi, I understand that you are his children. I want you to know that the entire city adores your father. He almost single-handedly saved our theater. You're lucky to have him. Thank you, said Sammy. The young man left. Sam moved to one side of the bed and Sammy to the other. Together, they grasped for their father's hands. Mark's eyes began to flicker the moment the 3 of them came into contact. Then they opened. Nurse Johnstone grabbed the doctor and gasped, "Oh my God. Look, doctor." She started going to Mark. The doctor stopped her. "Let's simply watch," he said. Mark's eyes were now completely open. He stared at Sam, then Sammy. What happened? His speaking was slow and laborious. Did you have a stroke when he asked? 2 weeks ago. Prognosis. The doctor got up and spoke. As far as we can determine, you should have fully recovered. But we still need to do some tests. And now that you're awake, we can start them. He and Nurse Johnstone departed. How long have you been here? We've just arrived. How are you feeling? Not sure. The 3 of them just glanced at each other. They all wanted to talk, but couldn't. Mark slipped in and out of consciousness. The nursing staff was in and out of the room doing their work. and another theatergoer came by. After several hours, the twins were eager to find a hotel and rest. Mark was awake. Daddy, we need to depart for a bit. We need to find a hotel to rest. We will be back in the morning. Mark looked around the room, where parents were still struggling to talk. What have you said? Where's my pants? He asked. They searched and discovered them in the small closet. Sam handed them to Mark. He had difficulty manipulating his arm. Frustrated, he mentioned the wallet. Keys. Sam removed Mark's keys and wallet and gave them to him. Mark shakes his head. Stay with my house, money, and car cards. You don't utilize a hotel. They understood. As they were leaving, Sammy leaned down and kissed him on the forehead. Sam touched his forearm. They all smiled. They searched his wallet downstairs in the lobby. His address was on his driver's license, so they took a cab there. They used his keys to get in. They set down their baggage and gazed around their father's house. Sammy headed to the kitchen. Sam walked over to his desk. Sammy, come here. What is it? He pointed the desk. It featured images of the two of them. Lots of photos, pictures from their high school graduation. He had to have been present to accept them. There were photos from Sam's wedding and even a couple of marquees in the maternity unit. There were images from their college graduation. Oh my God, I can't believe this. He was present. Sam. He was present. They were taken aback by his entire discussion of emotional involvement. He'd never truly detached himself from them. They weren't sure whether to cry for pleasure or because a blip had let them suffer for the past 5 years. They poured themselves drinks and surveyed the remainder of the house. There was nothing special there, and no hint of a girlfriend. They went outside to walk about. There was a garage at the back. Inside, they noticed 3 automobiles, a fairly new Mercedes 550 car. The other 2 autos reduced them to tears. There were 2 Mustangs, 1 silver and 1 yellow. Oh hell, Sammy. He kept the autos. Jesus Christ. They appear brand new. They spent the night at their father's residence. The following morning, they were in his room. Mark felt considerably better. Sam needs to go today. He needs to get back. His speech has improved significantly. Sam, I'm delighted you could come. It's nice to see both of you. I'm sorry for being a full horse's back. I didn't recognize that until I had a stroke. We will make up for lost time if you allow us, Sammy. You bet your back we will. Start right now. She leaned over and kissed her father. She spent the following 3 weeks with him. When he was discharged from the hospital, she ensured that he had 24-hour care. She shouldn't have bothered. There always appeared to be someone from the theater in the house. The young man she had seen on the first day in the hospital was correct. This city loved her father, but she too had to leave. Mark had made significant progress, and she had domestic obligations. The goodbye at the airport was bittersweet. They both cried. He continued apologizing for being a jerk all this time, but he promised to make things right. She stood in line to go through security, but her gaze could not leave her father's face. Finally, she was gone, and Mark exited the terminal building. He almost got to his car before turning around and heading straight to the ticket booth. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.